Okay, well, I'm Maria Watkins again, and I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. And Torrence Williams, which is our board chairman
Hmm.
and our retired police captain, he's in Atlanta, Georgia. So we're in the South, the deep South.
Okay, okay. I
Okay.
figured that. I wanted to make that point because I know, being in California and dealing with police, dealing with racism, dealing with all these things, I think each coast you go to is just a little bit different. So I thought it was important to kind of point out that you guys are from the South. So go ahead.
Yes. Yes, and as well as what inspired us, what inspired me in particular, because being the founder,
Hmm.
is that I was really inspired by God to do something. And
Hmm.
He gave me the idea of starting this app and having this app to do all these functionalities so that we can make a change. And what happened with me is that it made me realize that God is concerned about injustice acts,
Hmm.
and so that's what really started it. So as a result, we've been working on it ever since, and this happened in August of 2017, and
Hmm.
we've been building the framework, building the infrastructure to get to this place where we are now.
Got it.
So, but he's concerned about the injustice that's happening to, and have been happening to African Americans for a very long time. It's
Hmm.
historical, it's current, it's a problem that the next generation will have to deal with. So we wanted to do something to change it, to make it better, not only for this generation, but to generations to come.
Definitely. That
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. Now, Torrance, being that
Yes.
you were being a police officer for so many years,
Right. Right.
I'm really interested to know what inspired you to get involved.
Well, basically, I think police work was just a way for me to learn more and to see more things. I'm originally from Montgomery, Alabama.
Hmm.
So as a child, I learned a lot and was around a lot of people that were involved in the civil rights movement. Actually, one of the hardest things I had to do, believe it or not, was to tell my father that I had become a police officer.
Hmm.
That was real hard for me, because where I was from, when I saw the police, it was just common that I was going to run. That was the first thing I was going to do. No reason I was going to take off. Um, I became a police officer because I ended up, when I came to the Metro Atlanta area, and Maria and I met over in the AU Center, and she's the closest thing I have to a sister. But I ended up working with a program called Reach Out Incorporated, which dealt with kids from high crime, low income neighborhoods.
Hmm.
And in doing that, that kind of gave me a passion for it. Now, Maria used to call me anytime she would hear about things that would happen involving the police that were negative, and she would try to get my take on it because she knew at that time I was a police officer.
Hmm.
And I would give her my opinion, and she would see some of the things I was saying, and then sometimes we go back and forth, and we do that today, even on the board. We're right there because they,
And
they,
of
they always
course,
say you still blue. And
yep, yep,
but
yep.
so a lot of times I used to explain to them, and they would explain to me to open my eyes about stuff, that there's always more than one way to see things.
Hmm.
One thing I told her, that as a police officer, and let me say this, and she kind of disagreed with me when I put my numbers out there. I used to tell her, I said 95% of police out here are good guys, and they go out and they protect people that they don't know, and a lot of times that hate them. That being said, that small percentage that do go out there and will do, and that do the wrong thing, that's too many.
Hmm.
The police department is like a microcosm of what society is, and these numbers may be wrong, but and I've read it somewhere. You got 17% of the people that's gonna do right all the time.
Hmm.
You got 17% of the people that's gonna do wrong all the time. And then you have the 64% of those people that's gonna follow whatever the crowd's doing, whichever crowd's bigger on what they're doing.
Hmm.
That's how society technically is, I think. And that's kind of how the police department is. And and it is what it is. One
Hmm.
thing I learned in policing, especially in being a supervisor and taking complaints, is, and you hit on it. I'm glad you brought it up when you were talking about this young lady, Andrea Stevenson, about reading and writing and whatnot. One thing I found out as a supervisor, anytime and it's sad, but it's true. Anytime somebody wanted to complain on police misconduct, they had a complaint on a police officer. If you told them, and I'm talking about my folks, people of color, if you told them and you had to do it, I need you to put it in writing. Okay, because that's what we do. We say, hey, I need you to put it in writing. 85% of the time, I'm telling you, the complaint's going away. It is what it is, because they don't want to write it. For the most part, people don't want to put it on paper because, number one, they don't trust the police and stuff. And they say you all protect each other. And I always give this example, and stop me if I'm going too long, but I always give this example. I had a guy that made a complaint on an officer, one of my officers that was working an extra job. Actually, he was an officer. He was in the zone that I was in. And so the complaint came through us. And officer was working an extra job. The guy complained on the officer. Well, it was the officer's word against this guy's word. And we have 4 ways as complaints is going to go. Well, we couldn't sustain the complaint, which means we couldn't prove the complaint because it was this guy's word against what the officer wrote down and what the officer said. What ended up happening with the complaint was, and I use this when I used to talk to people on the street to get them, if you got something wrong, you need to say something. What ended up happening with the complaint was the complaint went into the officer's file, and that's where it sat, right? All right. 8 months later, 8 months to a year later, I hear a complaint comes across on the same officer at the same location where he was working this extra job. Okay, different complainant. All right, the sergeant comes to me. I'm sergeant supervisor. He comes to me and he said, you know, look, this is a complaint we have. It's on such and such an officer. It's the officer's word against this guy's word. So I asked him, I said, who was the officer again? And he told me who it was. And he let me know a little bit about the complaint. And it kind of, my memory started going, and I kind of remembered the complaint. I asked the sergeant, I said, well, Sergeant, did you check the officer's file? He said, I checked it, but I'll check it again. I said, do that. So he went back and checked the officer's file. When he checked the officer's file, he found the other complaint that was still in the file, even though it had not been sustained. Okay? But what it caused him to do, and he came back to me, he said, I think I'm going to have to go at this officer a little bit harder because that complaint looks a lot alike. I said, yeah, it does. So you might want to hit him with it and see where we go with it. Anyway, he went back, he questioned the officer, interrogated the officer, and the complaint ended up being sustained. It was sustained, which means the complaint was a good complaint, the second complaint. Now, had the first guy not made his complaint, that second complaint would not have been sustained because it was the same exact thing. He had nobody, he had no witnesses. We couldn't prove anything, but because we knew that was in that officer's file, we were able to go back and come from that point of view. Look, how do you have the same thing happen with somebody else different, and your response is basically the same? So I encourage people to empower themselves. And when Maria came to me, and when Maria talked to me about this idea that she had, and we used to talk about it, I said, you know, that's a big thing. I said, the problem is, I said, our folks, number one, they need to be empowered. I say, we hear transparency all day long. And I said that this is the thing. I said, even in some of these supervisor classes I used to go to, the supervisor tells us, you know, when they're teaching the class, they'll tell us what we need to do. And I would stop, and at the break, I would go up to them and I would tell them one thing. I say, look, everybody in this class knows what we're supposed to do. You're not telling us anything. I say, the question is, will they do it? We know people know what to do. So when she came to me and she mentioned this idea to me, which I thought was wonderful, and I thought it was great that she came up with it, or that it was given to her, because she's always had that passion for helping people. I said, man, this is something, this is where we need to go, because we need to empower our people. And that's what it's about, empowering our people. That's what the Rightthere app is about. It's about education, empower themselves, and keeping people calm. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to win an argument on the street when you're making the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury also. What you need to do is you need to survive that encounter, okay, so you can fight another day, okay? So and that's what Rightthere Protect app does for you, or Rightthere Protect, the service, does for you, because you know you have backup. If you don't know how to make a complaint, it can help you make a complaint. Now, at the same
Exactly.
And at the same time, we're not out there to defend people that's doing